Hi, I'm Debbie Moraes, and this is Legal Matters, the program that's designed to address some of the critical and controversial at times issues that are facing businesses and consumers. It's legal matters, it's legal information, practical solutions, and straight talk about a wide variety of topics. In recent segments, we've discussed healthcare reform, and now a very timely topic. Most of us in this area have suffered from the floods or been affected by them in one way or another. So, home sweet home or home sweet home improvements or not so. The historic floods are done. FEMA is still with us. As we understand it, both Rhode Island and Massachusetts, they'll be with us for quite some time. And while all of those life-sustaining needs of food and water and shelter are pretty much behind us, now begins the time of repairs. So to help you avoid some of the pitfalls and some of the problems that are associated with those repairs, we have with us our legal team of Jackie Grasso and David Bizarre from Odette Bizarre Cordero Grasso Law Firm in East Providence. And hopefully you'll be able to give us some tip-offs to avoid the rip-offs. What's been going on? What's the latest from what you folks know with the things that have been most critical?
I looked on a couple of websites last night, most notably the Massachusetts Attorney General's website and Rhode Island, and there's a flashing screen that says, "Be aware of home improvement scams," and tips on how to avoid getting scammed by home improvement companies, because as you know, a lot of them are out there trying to solicit business, and in some cases they're actually knocking on people's doors.
Is there anything really wrong with that, or should that just be a red flag to start?
I would say that's a red flag to start. I think the most important thing everybody needs to do is, if you're going to hire somebody, ask for a few references and call those references, ask for phone numbers just to determine if this is going to be a legitimate contractor that you're hiring and if the company is going to perform the work to completion.
Right, and here's the situation. People have gone through cleaning up as best they can, and now it's time for the repair. I would suggest that if you do this, it's appropriate to get more than one estimate. You'd want a couple at least, if not three, and as Jackie said, on each of them get references and make sure whoever you're going to hire is registered with the Contractors Board.
It's interesting. The good news is that FEMA said once you tell us that there are problems, we'll give you a check right away. I guess that's part of the reason why there's been such a rush of those who are even doing the mold remediation, as well as ongoing or the rest of the repairs that need to take place. So we have to be aware of, let's go over some of the things we need to be aware of. You say, beware of someone coming to the door. What if they're in the neighborhood and they just say, well, I'm doing his, I can do yours. I can do it at a discount, I can do it now.
You know, in and of itself, I don't think it's a bad thing,
Right.
But you have to do your homework.
Yeah.
Okay? If you go to a doctor, you want to get references. If you go to a lawyer, you get references. So.
And as Jackie said, it's not unusual, actually,
Yeah.
for people to knock on your door if they are doing your neighbor's house or something, because they know you were flooded too. But that's not the end of the inquiry. You know, it's the beginning. All right, yeah, sure, give me a quote. That's okay. But get others. And find someone who didn't knock on your door and get a quote from them too. Check the references, check with other people to see who they're using.
More importantly is use the website as your primary tool, because in Rhode Island and in Massachusetts, the law requires all home improvement contractors to be registered with the state. Licensing is something totally different, so you always want to ask your contractor, do you have a registration? What is the registration number? And in fact, any advertisements, any solicitations that the company uses has to disclose their registration number. Registration number should be on the contracts. Contracts are complicated things.
Right. We can talk about
We
that.
probably should.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, I don't know. I didn't check in Massachusetts, but apparently at the Rhode Island Governor's website there is a watch list, because
Yes.
apparently there have already been, never mind scammers, but those who've already been identified as such, or even they've had their licenses suspended. So
Rhode Island
worthwhile to take a
has,
look at.
I think it's called the Contractors Registration Board. You can link into it through the Attorney General's office. You can go on that website, even Massachusetts through their Attorney General website, just to see whose licenses have been suspended. They'll give you the names, and in some cases they even tell you how long the suspension is.
Yeah, and it's a process. So you talked about it already. FEMA comes in if you have flood insurance, and they are very good, I have found, in my own experience and actually through other people I know, of getting you some money right away. And, you know, the first critical piece is getting the place cleaned out, get the water out, try to rip out what needs to be ripped out. Now you're at a point where you're ready to rebuild. And the people who knock on your door, sure, talk to them, whatever. But after you've identified who you want to do the work, it's really important that you enter into a written contract before any work begins.
And you say that it makes sense that someone should have 3 bids anyway, or get 3 different.
Sure.
Let's talk a little bit about how that actually happens. When someone's going to be giving you a bid, it makes sense that you'd want a detailed description of what's going on. How detailed does it need to be before you, so that you are comparing apples and oranges?
I think it depends on the nature of the work. I think most importantly, it should be in writing, because if it's in writing, you have something to refer to. Because you know the verbal promises only take you so far,
Right.
and the state requires that any contract over $1,000 has to be in writing. But
Is it 500 or 1,000?
I believe it's
Well,
$1,000.
here's
In
the-
Rhode Island?
David will tell you about the statute of frauds.
You want to talk about the
Yes.
statute of frauds a little bit?
This
A
is the
contract,
time.
yeah, a contract is an agreement with people who have capacity, and there's consideration, and it's legal. Well, it also sometimes has to be in writing. The statute of frauds, and what people get confused about, which is what you just mentioned, is, well, if it's over $500,
the
doesn't
sale
it
of
have to be in
goods.
writing? That's for goods.
Yep.
This work is really a service. You're hiring someone to come in. There is some material that's being provided, but you're also hiring them for their expertise to bang the nails in the right place and make sure what they do is correct. That's a service. And the $500 rule doesn't apply to services. The Contractors Board, the state of Rhode Island, requires that if the service being provided is more than $1,000, that has to be in writing.
That's right. And again, if they're not a registered contractor, the state enforces a penalty, because it's a misdemeanor not to be a registered contractor. So what is buyer beware, caveat emptor?
Correct.
You have to really be aware of that. And what contracts have to have certain things in them as well.
Right, and as we go through that, there's a lot of clauses that are not required to be in the contract, but as the consumer, you want to make sure they're in there. For example, you want to know, is this person doing the work themselves, or are they bringing in subcontractors? And if they are, what's the clause, what's provided in there to remove any liens that the subcontractors might put on your property? You want to have that spelled out up front. You don't want someone to hire someone else, do work, not pay them, and then have a lien put on your property.
And the other thing is workers' compensation insurance. People don't think of that, but you want to know from your contractor if he or she has workers' compensation, and if that compensation insurance covers the subcontractors, because there have been issues, legal issues about
Right.
that as well.
Right.
Does it also include what vendors they would be using, the Home Depot, to buy the studs or the whatever? Do you need to have a lien to make sure that that contractor who you hire has paid his bills, or if he goes out of business, skips town, that you're not held liable for that purchase? Is that a part of that
That's an
contract?
interesting question, because that would be sort of what we would call a materialman's lien. And if Home Depot delivers the goods right to your house, as opposed to your contractor goes there and buys the goods, if he's going there and buying the goods, what you really need spelled out in the contract is what materials are going to be used, so that if he says he's using pressurized, wood, that's what he's using. And so it's not so important where he buys it, as long as he's bringing it to you.
I think it needs to be delineated as well that the cost for the repairs also covers the cost of the goods. If it
Right.
doesn't cover the cost of the goods, then you want to put that in the contract. Anything, too much language is probably better than not enough language.
And so how do you, once you have one contract, one bid that seems pretty comprehensive, how do you work towards getting the other two to make sure that they're apples and oranges? I mean, obviously you're going to say, I want the complete specs as best you can give them. That's pretty open-ended, but somebody might have a different way of doing things. How do you get to compare the apples and oranges, unless you happen to be a contractor yourself and understand all that? How do you deal with that?
Well, there's a couple of things you could do. Obviously, you're going to try to figure out on your own